All right. Hello once again. So today we're starting the new course about the Angular. Uh, so I would like to get a brief overview of what Angular is. Uh, we'll talk about the main features, the project structure, and during the course we'll start implementing a to-do list app from scratch to see what features are present in the Angular. All right. So first of all, Angular is the framework that enables us to create single-page applications. Uh, the mostly this framework is used to create the web applications, but also it could be used for creating not only web applications, but also desktop, mobile, or whatever. As other libraries and frameworks, the Angular bases on the component-based approach development. Like I mentioned, it could run on any platform. Also, it enables us to divide our main areas, feature areas by module and organize the project structure. It contains all the test suites, test instruments to perform the testing of the application. And the main developer of this framework is Google. It's developed and maintained by the Google. And other facts that the Angular uses TypeScript by default. And I guess TypeScript is the standard for the web-based application development, since it enables us with a lot of features. And even in React, you could use TypeScript as well. Okay, so to bring a better understanding what features are included in the Angular, let's consider the building blocks of any Angular application. There are lots of them. So let's start from the very beginning, from the components. Like I mentioned, during Angular development, this is the component-based framework. So the component is one of the crucial building blocks of the Angular application. So basically, a component is a set of elements. It could be a header, footer, or even the card with the post. And each component can include its buttons, its elements, triggers, and each component also includes the logic on how we can handle the triggers, the elements on the component. So basically, component is our custom element that could be used in any part of our application. So about directive. For now, let's assume that directive is the custom attribute, the custom HTML attribute that can customize the behavior of our elements. We'll see how directives work in the future. Services are kind of helper functions, or even not functions, but the helper classes that can help us to better organize the logic of our application. It can contain the business logic, but the most common use case of services is to organize the communication between our web application and the backend. But also services can include other side logic for better organization. Okay, maybe you get acquainted with the routing from the React course. So Angular has the routing as well. So it's one of the main building blocks, and it also can organize the routing of our application, since Angular is a single-page application framework. Basically, we tell the block on which page we should want to perform the navigation, and it decides where or even which component we should load to show the content on the page. And the module, which unites all the building blocks together, and we can organize our structure by modules. For example, we can have a module for the feed logic, for handling the shopping cart, for listing pages, and so on. And we can divide our whole application into smaller pieces that's called module. Like in JavaScript, you have ES6 modules as well, but in Angular module is kind of different thing. It has some other features, and we'll see how the modules works in the future lectures. Okay, so we want to develop our new Angular application and how we can get started with it. First, we need a tool which is called the ng-cli. And in order to create our new Angular application and start developing it, we need to install this tool via npm install command, and we can easily run our newly generated application with the ng-serve command. And also there are a bunch of commands that ng-cli supports to create a new building blocks that we considered previously. All right, so like I mentioned, we are to create our new application, and we'll start developing it from scratch. So first, we need to ensure that the ng-cli is installed globally. So we can check it by typing npm install the default package, which is @angular/cli. So the installation will take some amount of time. So where the patient wants, maybe we can have some cup of coffee. And the ng-cli is already installed. So to create our new application, we basically type ng new. And since we're creating the to-do list application, let's name the to-do list management, something like that. Okay, so a couple of questions asked during the generation of new project. So would you like to add Angular routing? Okay, let's skip this step for now. And here is a proposal which style sheet we can use. Well, the most common case to use SCSS syntax. This is the most popular choice, and SCSS as well as SAS enables you with a huge amount of features like handling variables, creating mixins, and some syntax sugar features. So let's choose the SCSS for now. And it starts generating our new Angular application. So let's wait for some time for the dependencies to be installed. and while this procedure is performing. So let's open our newly generated application. Okay, well, we opened the Angular application. We can see the following project structure, and I would like to have some brief overview of it. So since the Angular application is the TypeScript enabled, so we can have the TS config files for such a purpose with generated properties. And also we have the bunch of scripts here to build, to start, and to perform some tasks related to our app. Okay, what about this one? So this is the kind of huge JSON file, which with the purpose of configuring our Angular application. So for now, we can leave it as is. However, let's see what's happening here. So there is a bunch of configuration, including the sections for styles, for assets, and for the third-party scripts. So the Angular by default uses Webpack, but as you can see, we don't have any Webpack configuration file here. So the build process occurs under the hood, and we are not able to access the Webpack configuration file. So if we need to perform some adjustments during the build, all we have is the Angular JSON. So here we can include some third-party scripts in the script section, some styles, if we want to be the styles to be included in our bundle, and some additional assets. So this is what we can configure from the build perspective. Well, I can predict a question of, hey, so we don't have the Webpack configuration here. So what if I really need to adjust the whole build process? Well, there is a custom Angular builder, so we can install it and define the custom Webpack configuration. However, in most cases, you can go with the default one. It should be enough. Okay. Yeah, there are a lot of settings here. But for now, we can see that this section could be helpful for us if you want to include additional files. Okay, so we have also a source C file with all of our source codes. Let's see what's going on here. We have the file styles.scss for any global files if you wish to define the files for the whole application instead of defining it per each component. So here you can add your global styles. Okay, sorry about this one, we could skip it. Main.ts is our entry point. Here we are defining the entry point of our application, and this is called the app module. Basically, app module is not the regular JS, ES6 module, but it's the ng module. Okay, so this is our entry point. We have the entry point also for the template. Here we can see that we have one single element here, and this is the root component. what the app means. So app is the prefix for all our components. Remember that component is the custom HTML element that contains the custom template and custom logic for the component. And actually, we can customize this prefix by adding the prefix in the Angular JSON configuration right here. In case if you really need to customize, for example, instead of app, we can use the to-do list prefix. But also we are required to do some other adjustments since we made the changes to the configuration. So we'll perform it shortly. Okay, so this here is the pretty simple. So we can also add the loading of custom scripts or style sheets here instead of including it in the whole bundle. So you can either add here or in the Angular JSON, and in that case, all the custom scripts or styles will be added to the whole application bundle. So what about these files? Basically, the Angular application can run in two modes, development or production. This file can include whatever data. The most common case is the API URL, some tokens, additional configurations. That depends on the particular environment and so on. So we can include some configuration constants here if you want them to depend from the environment, on the current environment. So then the same file for production as well. Okay, the assets folder will include our images, fonts, or any static data that will be served with the application bundle. And our source code starts with the app folder. So like I mentioned before, the app module is our entry point. And the main difference from the JavaScript module is that we define the metadata for the module. So I don't quite remember whether the React has some metadata for components. I guess no, but still, the following syntax is the decorator for the classes, and basically it's a regular function. For now, let's assume that these decorators are used to configure our TypeScript class. So we pass the metadata to some class. In our case, this is the module. And it has several sections. For example, here we define the which component will be our entry point. So when we define the root element here, so this is the app component, which is the root of the whole application. Okay, so and here we have several files for the root component. First is the class, which contains the logic, the state, the variables, and so on. And also the component has its own metadata where we specify this selector. So how our tag will be named to be used in the other templates, the spec file to create the unit tests for a particular component, SCSS files for styling the components, and of course, we can have a template. So here we are see within the template that is generated automatically by the ng-cli. So let's try to start our application by typing the command ng-serve. So let's wait for a couple of seconds to generate the application bundle to see what's going on. Okay, the application starts on the local host 4200. Let's see. Yeah, the application works. And here some useful links to the Angular documentation, so it possibly could be useful. And here is a hint how we can use the ng-cli to generate the building block, or in this case, how we can create a new component. So I would like to perform some adjustments since we modified the prefix of our components. So let's rename the selector and the reference to the selector in the index.html. So this, since the template is empty, because we removed it, yeah, no errors in the console, and that's great. Okay, so we have the root component, and we are about to start creating our to-do list. So basically, what's the component consists of 3 parts. One of them is the class. The second one is the metadata to configure our component, and the template. So basically, the component is the combination of the model, which is class, and the representation, which is the HTML file. So let's start with the small thing. Let's create a markup, the basic markup for our application. So it will have the header and footer, which are the HTML5 tags. Okay, and it will consist of some kind of form with the input and the button to submit the new to-do. So for the better semantics, let's wrap it to main. Oops. And here it will be the to-do list with the items. And here we'll have the name of the newly added item. Let's for now keep the static text and see what we can. Okay, submit. In header, let's include the title, to-do list management app. Okay. Let's add some style for the to-do item. Not to-do list, but to-do item. Okay, so let's keep the styling for now. How can we achieve the adding to-do functionality? So first, we need to access the value of the form. So when we type something and clicking submit or pressing the enter, we need this to-do to be added to the whole list. Okay, so we have the TypeScript class for such purpose. So let's try to do something here. Okay, so we need some method that will be invoked when the class component is created. Well, okay, since it's a class, so we can have the constructor and perform some initialization here. Also, we need some event handler to access the value of the input and where we can add the new item. Okay, so how can we achieve this? In the plain JavaScript, the possible solution is to store the element in our class. Let's say that we have the input query selector all, not all, just one query selector. And we'll have the element here. But this property does not exist in that component because we haven't declared it. So we can declare the input right here. Let's say it's HTML element, but the type could be null. But the Angular has the better solution for it. And when submit, we basically HTML input element. Okay, the object is possibly null. Okay, that's no problem because the TypeScript has optional chaining. Let's try to input the value to the console. But still, we need some event handler here. Let's try to do this. So basically, in JavaScript, you could just add the event listener to the button. When we click on it, we're in plain JavaScript, we're adding event listener, click. Let's see what we can do that here is used for assign. Okay, so let's assign some button here. Okay, let's see whether the following functionality works. Okay, our application is reloading. This is because the button type is submit, and the default behavior of the form when we're triggering the submit is to perform some action and reload the page. Okay, let's try the following solution. And nothing happens here. Okay, because something went wrong. Okay, but Angular has the better solution for it. So I propose to remove everything, including the declarations of the elements, and leave the onSubmit methods. Okay, and this is about the time to show some built-in features for such purposes. For example, if we want to create the event handler for some elements, we can simply do the following. By clicking on this button, we are calling the onSubmit method from our class. But it does nothing. So let's grab the data from the input somehow. I would leave at least input element here. And we'll try to log the item. Okay. Something went wrong here because it don't return anything. So the input is null. Okay. And what if we don't want to access our elements at all and use the built-in features? Okay, let's say we don't want to store anything about the elements. Let's say we want to have just a new value, which is string, and we'll log this new value on the console when we trigger onSubmit as no initializer. So basically it means that the property should be initialized with some value. Let's say that could be an empty string. But how can we tell the template that the value should be placed to the new value property? So let's add some additional property here. Which is called ng-model, new value. The error is occurred, and it says that ng-model isn't a known property of input. Okay, we know how to fix it. Just to add some additional dependency. It's like importing JS, but another one. And now we don't have any errors here. So we just added two new attributes to our elements, the event handler and something to bind our property from the class to the value of the input. Let's see whether it works. Okay. Don't have anything here because within ng-model is used within the form tag. title the name attribute is set on the form control must be defined as standalone in ng model options. Okay, or either we can just specify the name. This is item TODO item name, and let's just rename for consistency. Yeah, so we can see the new title from in our form. So we need this item to be appeared in our to-do list. So let's assume that this to-dos will be stored somewhere, and we'll create some array for it. And on submit, we'll add the newly created item. Okay, argument of type string is not assignable to parameter of type never. This is because we just specified the empty array. Since it's the TypeScript, we can specify the type of the array, and the rest will work right perfectly. So we added the new item to the array, and we need somehow to print all our to-dos in the to-do list. Okay, let's do the following. We need some kind of iterator that will help us to print off all elements of the array, and there is a new feature. The following syntax will create to-do item elements as many as the length of our array, which is the to-do list. And let's print the name. Now this braces will help us to access the code. And let's just print the item. Okay, so our list is empty. Let's try to create a new item. Okay, the enter key not works, but we can click the submit button. And everything will start adding right into our array. Let's add some extra feature. We need to clear the form input. Let's do the following. And we need to perform the submit functionality not only by clicking the button, but by pressing the enter button. So we can do it by removing the following property and binding the to submit event. So listen to the event submit, which is the default browser event. Okay, let's try it out. And it works perfectly. Okay, so what's going on in our main components? So we added a couple of extra features from the Angular. First, the syntax where we are specifying the name of the event, which is wrapped by parentheses, is called the event binding. So basically, it means that during the submit event, please invoke the method onSubmit, which is located in the app component. The following feature, which has parentheses and brackets, it means the two-way binding. So the parentheses is the event binding, and the brackets is stands for the property binding. So we are binding our to-do item name property of the component with the value of the input. So we binding our value with the value of the input element. And at the same time, we are listening to change event that will write our value to the to-do item name property. And so this syntax is the directive which is designed to customize the behavior of our HTML elements. So the syntax is pretty similar to the regular for-off loops from the JavaScript. So we're creating some local variable which represents the single item of the element from to-do list. And here we accessing this newly created local variable and printing it to the H2 element. Okay. So what else do we need here? Like any to-do list application, possibly we need some checkbox which will indicate whether the item is completed or not. So instead of strings, we'll need to store something more complex here. And since it's a TypeScript, perhaps it will be a good idea to define some interface for it. So let's create a new one. So maybe we'll just create a new folder here, which is called models, and place a new file, which will be to do. So I propose you to use such naming convention to specify what file is it's a model, component, or whatever. So, and let's create a new interface to do item, which will consist of ID to be able to find the element in the array. This could be ID, title, and is completed, which will indicate the progress. And this will be the Boolean. And during the submission, so this is the array of the to-do items. So instead of the regular string, we'll put the object here. Title is the to-do item name. Is completed false by default, and we need some ID. Well, let's create the ID counter to be able to push the to-do item with the unique ID. And during the submission, we'll increment the ID counter like this. Let's see what we have. We have object. Yeah, that's because we have the new structure for the to-do item. And as we can see, the IDE gives us a hint that this is the item which is type of to-do item, and we can access the property title. And we can see that everything works perfectly fine. And additionally, we need some checkbox here to indicate the progress. So let's create a new one. Yeah, we have checkbox, but from the model perspective, we don't change anything in the object. So we need somehow to bind the checkbox with the properties completed. So what can we do here is to use our ng-model property from the example above. And it will change the property of the item. But better to use something else. For example, let's say we want to have the methods toggle complete. That will grab the item and toggle it. So checkbox can have the inner event change. And since the item is a local variable, so we can pass the item right in our methods. Well, let's see if it actually works. Let's set item 1, item 2. Yeah, and it changes the boolean from the item in our case. So is completed changes once we are clicking on the checkbox. Okay, so we have the basic functionality of our to-do list. But actually we have all the logic in our app component, which is not a good practice. And we need to organize it somehow. And I've mentioned about the building blocks, and let's consider how we can create a new custom components to organize the to-do list and divide them by separate elements. Okay, I mentioned that component is the custom element of the application, and it consists of the following basis. The template, where we are defining the markup of the component, the class, the TypeScript class that contains all the properties, methods, and basically performs all the logic which is related to this component, and the metadata, which defines via the TypeScript decorator and performs the configuration. And how it looks like. So the class and templates are tightly coupled between each other. So the template, like we saw in the example, has the access to the class property and methods. And at the same time, each change in the class properties will affect the template as well. Okay, so we realized that we need to organize our application somehow, and we need to create a new component. So we'll perform the command ng generate, specifying which building block we want to generate. And here we specify how it will be called. So also it could be not the name of the component, but we can specify where it could be stored. So in this case, we're creating the directory which named component and generating the new component with a name to-do list. All right, so let's try to create a new component and perform some modifications to our project. So what components we'll have? Let's have a look at the application. Ideally, we would like to have the two components like add to do. This is the form. Let's say that it's add form component, and the list below, it could be separate component as well. Add to do. To do list and to do item. And in this case, the app component will be more simpler than we have for now. So here we'll have just add to do. Again, if you might have noticed that instead of app, the ng-cli grabs the prefix from the angular.json and generates the component with the prefix that we've just specified. And to do list. Okay, and we need somehow to move the markup from the app component to the newly generated components. Let's start with the form. Add to do. We'll have the markup here, and it raises the errors that the method does not exist on the add to do component. I'll fix it shortly. And this markup perhaps will go to the to-do list. Okay, and the markup of app component is much easier, and it's more preferable to have as less markup in the app component as possible. Okay, and let's gradually move the logic from here to the newly generated component. So to do item name is the new name that we'll specify in the form. And submit is, yeah, of course, it's from the form component. We'll do here. So, okay, here is the catch. The first catch that the add to do component should know nothing about the to-do list. Okay, we'll think on how we can fix it. the to-do list should obviously contain the array of the to-dos. And we should move the toggle complete to the to-do list component as well. So basically we need to import the to-do item interface. But what should we do here? So we don't have access to the to-do list. But everything we can move is just the ID counter. So what should we do? I mentioned about the events under which we performed the like kind of binding. So we're listening to some native events. So what if we want to create our custom event that will tell that we are about to create a new to-do item and we want to push it to the to-do list. So let's create the new event. How we can do this is create a new property of the add to-do component, like this one. So this is the decorator that tells that we are about to create a new custom event at to-do. So this is the name of our custom event. And to make everything functional, we're creating an instance of the class event emitter which is imported from the Angular/core. And instead of pushing to the to-do list, we are going to do the following. Add to-do, we're triggering the method which is called emit, and it tells the event emitter that we are going to dispatch our custom event with the payload that we just passed to the emit method. And if you remember, that TypeScript has the generic functionality, and we can specify that we are going to dispatch the event with the payload of the type to-do item. Okay, so from the add components, we can listen to this event, and IDE helps us with hints. And we are going to listen to add to-do events, and we need to invoke something. So let's move the to-do list to the app component back, because we need to perform something. We'll create the method inside our app component class. Okay, but how can we access the event payload? That's pretty simple. So this is the internal argument, which tells that we are going to grab the data from the event emitter and pass it right to the onAddToDo methods. but the TypeScript raises error because we didn't specify the type of the argument. Item. Okay, so we fixed the add-in functionality, but still we have the errors on the to-do list component. So because we moved the to-do list to the top, to the app component, this component should also know how can we access the to-do list from the app component. So we need the feature that enable us to pass the property to the to-do list component. We have the another decorator, which is called input. There's no initializer. Okay, let's initialize it in this case. So no error raised here, but we have the empty array. So we need to pass the to-do list from the app component to the to-do list. And we can achieve it by passing the to-do list in by the following way. So let's test whether it works. Nope. What's the reason? Let's figure it out. Let's maybe. Okay, we don't see that on add to do it actually involves. Let's see on the add to do what we have. We have on submit. On submit will trigger the methods on submit. Aha. So here is the catch, because we specified type button. But if we do the following, everything will work perfectly fine. So let's switch off the breakpoint. All right. So everything seems to work perfectly fine. But we need some styles for the to-do item. As you can see, we defined the style for the to-do item class, but this style is not applied to the item. This is because when we define the styles inside of the styles of the component, it applies only to the elements that are located inside the app component. So this is the cool feature because it creates a kind of a namespace of the CSS classes, and we cannot access the styles or override the styles of the to-do item, which is located inside other component. So let's move to the to-do list component, because we locate the markup there, and everything works perfectly fine. And again, so once we created the component for to-do item, let's perform some refactoring. So we'll move the markup of the to-do item here. We don't need the iterator because it will look like the following. But still, we need something. Again, we need custom properties to pass the to-do item right here. And we'll do it by the following way. And init. And we need to specify the custom events. So on changing the checkbox, we want to invoke the following methods and emit the custom event. Okay, I see that these kinds of errors are pretty annoying. In case if we're definitely sure that we'll always pass the item property, let's make some additional customization in the tsconfig file. I guess declaration source map. Is it all right? Input access modifiers, destination parameters. Well, I don't quite remember the name of the configuration. So let's fix it for now in the following way. And since the object is possibly null, so optional chain will work perfectly fine. So toggle complete, and we will listen to the custom event to toggle the to-do. Not change, but toggle complete. Let's rename the following methods and pass the current item to do these. Let's see if everything works. We didn't pass the item as the property. As we can see, everything works as expected. Okay, so let's get a brief look what we have done. Instead of storing everything in the root component, we created the new components with their own logic and separate template in such a way that that component now looks simpler than in the first version of our application. We performed some additional, we implemented some additional features for that component. And as we can see, we used the following syntaxes. So this is for we listening for some event, and as we can see, this syntax will allow us to listen not only to default events, but listen to the custom ones. And inside the brackets, we are performing like a property binding. So we are passing some data to the property. So this property is created inside the to-do list component, and we are just passing some data to this property. And also, we can not only passing the property bind to the custom properties, but we can also bind to the default properties as well, like we observe it with the events. For example, let's move this the title of the application and pass it to the app title property. Choose the string, and instead, so we could use the interpolation here and print the app title. And we can also do the following. So basically, H1 is the HTML element. And what you're dealing with the JavaScript, when you get to the element via the query selector or get element by, you can access the element properties such as inner text, inner HTML, style, and so on. And we can do the similar logic right here and pass the app title like the native property. So again, we performed the property binding to the default property of the H1, which is inner text. And again, we can see the title of our application, but with the help of the property binding. So we can also have the same functionality with other properties. So it has some hints on which properties we can bind, like scroll top, outer, HTML, class list, style, align, link, and so on. This is the default properties. But also we can have some additional ones, and we'll consider them in the future lectures. Okay, so we learned that our template in the Angular application has the interpolation syntax, which allows us to access the properties from the class components. We learned that we can perform the event and the property binding. These bindings work with both native and custom events or properties. And basically, we created the components interactions. So components can interact with each other with the usage of the events and property bindings. Okay, so let's refer to the presentation to see to revise what we have done. So this is the preliminary layout of our application, except we don't have the aside menu for now, but we will add it in the future. This is how our components tree look like when we performed the decomposition of our application. And a brief look on the bindings. So the property binding allows us to pass the data from the class properties to the template. By template, I mean default HTML elements and components as well. And the output binding, which allows us to listen to some built-in events and also to react to the custom events as well. And this syntax stands for the two-way data binding, where we used in the ng model property, which helps to pass the property to some item, to the input element, and at the same time listen to any changes of the value of the input element and write the data to the TODO item name. So we performed the two-way binding in this case. Okay. So I've already performed the demo of the app decomposition. All right, I would like to have a small stop here and ask you whether you have some questions at this stage. Maybe something is unclear for you and you need me to explain on some details.
I have some questions there. Yeah, are there only class components in Angular, or
I'm sorry, could you repeat please your question?
Are there only class components in Angular, or is there also a way to write like functional components in React?
No, we have Angular has only class components.
Okay, and I also have a question about HTML in Angular. Like, as we know, in React it's JS6, and how this extension of HTML is achieved in Angular.
So in Angular, you have additional syntax to deal with bindings that we discussed before. So in React, you also perform some kind of bindings as well and listening to events. So in Angular, Angular has its own template syntax. And basically, you don't need JS6 extension here because the Angular has its own syntax for dealing with some kind of bindings, elements, customization, and so on.
So, I mean, is HTML in Angular also transformed in JavaScript, like in React?
Exactly.
Okay. And another question about CSS, like how local applying styles locally is achieved? Is there like generating unique classes or?
So let's investigate and inspect the elements where we added the border. And as you can see, some kind of selector, custom selector is added here. And that's how the namespace of CSS classes is achieved to apply styles locally.
Okay, thank you.
Well, I know that most of the information could be unclear and completely new for you. So if you ask me something to clarify, that could be great. But I believe since you've been working with React, that couldn't be a great problem for you, but still. Okay. I would suggest to add a new feature for our to-do list application. For example, I would like to differentiate the completed to-dos and the upcoming to-dos that should be completed. So for now, we have the single list of all of the items and the checkboxes that indicates that the to-do is actually completed. So let's create a separate list for to-dos that are going to be completed and the to-dos that are already completed. So I'd like to just to create the full list. So we don't need to-do item here because it's, as we can see, don't work because its styles are applied locally. Oh, wow. That's because we have two lists for now. Okay. Something like this. Space around maybe be better. Okay, we have two columns. Let's specify the widths for the to-do item. Some fixed width, let's say 100 pixels. And again, still we have the same to-dos on both lists. So let's create two separate lists. I'd like to start with creating two new properties. Let's say upcoming to-dos of type to-do, array of the to-do item, and the completed to-dos. So we're going to have two separate lists. And let's create the method that should separate our whole to-do list by two. Let's say it's handle to-do list. And I propose to have the access modifier because we are sure that handle to-do list should not be invoked from the template. So this is a good practice to have the private methods for such helper methods. So let's see, that's this upcoming to-dos to-do list filter. Let's have a simple solution for now and think on how we can improve. And complete it for completed to-dos. If you know how to make this logic better, so you can let me know. Okay, so we need to invoke the handle to-do list in two scenarios. When we pass the to-do list to the component and when we are triggering the toggle complete. So the to-do list is passed from the app component. And we need to listen to any changes when we pass the new array of to-do list. First of all, I would like to do the following. because it's a good practice to have the immutable properties. So let's move here. Okay, so we have some method which is called ng-cli, which is generated automatically. And it's like in React, it's component mount, something like this. So this method calls when the component is created. Instead of console log, we'll handle the to-do list. So let's see whether it works. No, because we need to pass the. So the left list will be upcoming to-dos. And this one is completed to-dos. Okay, nothing works because the to-do list has been changed, and we moved the declaration of to-do list to the app component. And to-do list don't have an idea about the changes under the to-do list. Okay, in this case, let's refer back to the presentation and talk about the lifecycle hooks of the components. There are several of them. So ng-on-init is one of the lifecycle hooks that invokes when the component is created, but there are other ones. First is ng-on-changes. So this is called before ng-on-init, and it triggers every time when the input bindings are changed. So this is exactly what we need. So before moving to the code, let's consider other lifecycle hooks. So like I mentioned, ng-on-init initializes the components, and it's called once when the component is created. And there are the bunch of the lifecycle hooks, so you can refer to the documentation, but the most popular of them that ng-on-changes, on-init, on-destroy, and ng-after-view-init. So as for this one, this lifecycle hook invokes when the template is generated. So you need to use ng-after-view-init when you need to refer to some HTML element that isn't created, initialized during the ng-on-init, and that's why we weren't able to access the input from the, we didn't access the value of the input element because the element isn't created yet. So if in that case, we could use the ng-after-view-init lifecycle hook to access the HTML element. And as for the ng-on-destroy, it's when the component is removed from the DOM, when we navigate to another page, or when we have some, let's say, logic of removing the components from the DOM. So within this lifecycle hook, we can perform some cleanup of properties of instances to avoid the memory leaks in our application. Okay, so the ng-on-changes is our option because we need to listen to changes of the input binding. And in order to use this lifecycle hook, so we need to define the ng on changes and call the handle to-do list here. Okay, something like that. But I don't know why this hasn't thrown any error. But in order to use the lifecycle hook, we need to implement the corresponding interface. So why we need to do that? Because if we don't implement the interface, I mean, if we don't specify the methods from the interface, it will raise an error because we implement the ng on an init interface, but the ng on init method is missing. Okay, so I guess let's try it out whether the functionality works. So we see that we added some bunch of data. So let's try to, okay, so we see that items are moving from the column to column, but something wrong with the checkboxes. Okay, let's see what's wrong with the checkbox. So we see that some binding is missing here. So let's add it. Item is completed. So cannot be used in assignment. Okay. Okay. Toggle complete. So, okay. And what if we just want to press the value? Like this one. So value in is the inner property. We just performed the property binding here. Okay. That's value. I guess the checkbox has inner property checked. Okay, cool. Guess everything works as expected. So what I would like to implement additionally, when we move the to-do item to the done, so perhaps we need some additional style for it to differentiate whether the item is completed or not. So how can we achieve it? So in the plain JavaScript, possibly you will create the additional class for the completed item. So let's do as we'll do in the JS. So we'll create a new class for the to-do item. So in case if you don't familiar with the SCSS syntax, going through. So if you're not familiar, this is the shortcut of the following one: to do item completed. So in case this element will have two classes, to do item or complete and completed, we'll apply the text decoration. So for now, we need somehow to apply this class to the completed to do. So how can we do this? We can check for the Boolean property and grab the elements and apply the class to add it to the class list. But we have another option. So there is the inner property, which is called ng class, where we can specify the conditions when to apply this or that particular class. Or we can do the following. So these syntaxes are the same, but in ng class you can pass as many classes as you want. So let's test to see whether it works how it's designed. Yeah, it actually works. All right, I suppose for the features of to-do list application for today, this is it. We will add new features in the future lectures, and we'll get acquainted with all of the building blocks. And what I want to mention for today in additional. So here is the whole list of properties that could be added to the components metadata. Some useful links for you to get better understanding of what we discussed for today. Especially, you can look through the tutorial, which is called Tour of Heroes, where all the processes that we performed today are described, starting from creating a new project via ng-cli, generating components, the description of the metadata properties, and basically the full description of the features that we discussed today. And also there is the link to the examples of the syntax that we used for today. So you can refer to this repository to see some other examples of the template syntax. I will just briefly show you how to work with it. For example, so the binding, so the interpolation syntax, the property binding, the event binding, two-way data bindings, and so on. So you can check it out and to see how the template syntax works here. In case if you need better understanding of the processes that's we discussed. And I suppose this is it for today's lecture. So do you have additional questions to ask me? So let's wait for a couple of minutes for your questions, and then we'll wrap up today's lecture. Just in case, I will create the repository with the to-do list management app that we developed today and post the link to the source code for you with all of the materials as well. Okay, in case if you don't have questions for now, still you can reach me via Discord, but I propose you to tag my name directly for me to see your questions. And do not hesitate to contact me if something is unclear for you at this stage. And thank you for your attention and see you later.
Thank you. See you.